Dean, it's a really good question. Schools are important, but you can rebuild neighborhoods without them too.
I was going to say, we've probably seen the opposite, where there's been a number of neighborhoods where the school districts pulled back, the neighborhoods have come back, and then they're scrambling to figure out
how to
get a school back in.
Right.
Yeah.
I just wonder if it was a chicken and egg, if the housing comes first, then the school, or if the school is an important.
Yeah, I would say at this point the housing comes first and then the school. Yeah, the good news is Salina's not that hard to get around in, so it's doable. But what is the closest school to this?
The Oakdale School on East Iron.
It's Oakdale, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, my feeling here is that probably we wouldn't see the population to support a school until we got way down the line in the like phase 5 or 5A. Yeah. No, I mean and we showed that on the other diagram of that being a rehab focus area up to 9. Yeah, it's interesting because some of those houses are actually pretty nice. I mean, and 9th is a nice street. It really is. It's an attractive street. It's got park frontage. So yeah, I mean, I think that's right. The idea though is to look at these phased rehab target areas in 3 to 6 block chunks, and just to build one from another. And again, I think that it is important to see this as sort of philosophically as well as physical proposals. That we're illustrating a scenario, I guess more than anything, of showing how if you begin in a specific area and then build out from there in a patient and predictable way, that you really can transform a neighborhood and change its development pattern. But whether it happens, there are a lot of moving parts and a lot of variables, including willingness to sell and acquisition of properties and markets and so forth. But you've got to put an idea out there and begin to support it with financing and begin to let it take root. And you almost know for sure that what the reality may be different from these ideas, but the point is to begin to get the wheel rolling. I think 10 to 15 years, honestly. I mean, it doesn't happen by any means at once. But even if the immediate 5 Points area got just the immediate blocks to Woodland and north of the 5 Points intersection that don't involve that much development, a few commercial buildings, something like the Midas building, maybe the beginning of some work on the appearance and the quality of 5 Points itself. If that took place over a 2 or 3 year period, at the end of 3 years, there's a lot to start with, and then it builds on that. But I would imagine that each one, I mean, we would think conceptually of each one of these phases as being about a 3 year period. You want to make sure, very good question, you want to make sure that there's integrity at every phase. So that's why I think that the commercial, the building a quality commercial attractor at that intersection, using something like the Midas example or the Three Amigos example, really changes everything. I mean, to me, just the bit of landscaping in front of the convenience store has changed a lot, has changed a lot of the perceptions of that intersection. And although not a big project, has said to the traveler, something's happening here, somebody cares. Maybe this is a place where we can do business. And so you're beginning to see just a little bit of that happening at that intersection. The graphic shop across the street, a few other things that are really pretty good. Not far from Hawthorne Park, not far from the apartments. It builds, and each phase should be self-sustaining. So that you're not saying, well, we're over here trying to work, and back here it's already deteriorated to the point that we need to rebuild it. Then we're failing. Then the strategy is not working. It's got to be big enough and effective enough that it solidifies and it becomes a self-sustaining source of strength, which we can then move on with. That's why you don't necessarily start in the middle. You start at the place that people see, and it's visible and obvious that everybody knows what it is. And that's why I love 5 Points, because that has that feeling that when you say 5 Points to anybody in Salina, they know where it is.
5 Points.
5 corners, 5 corners, whatever. Or 4.5 corners.
4.5.
I really see Salina as, in a certain way, as dressed up, but hasn't figured out where to go. I mean, in other words, we know that the expertise exists here in and out of city government, that the commitment is here from, unless people are fooling us, but I don't think they are, that there is an understanding that we can't just build on the edges, and we can't just build in the city, but those two pieces have to complement each other in an economically viable way. But we're struggling with the ways to make it happen, which is what I'm hoping we're able to do through this process. Where do you start? How do you take these various agreements and common assumptions? And I think there's I know that there are always controversies, but there's broad agreement over overall large-scale objectives. Everybody wants the city to prosper. Everybody wants to meet housing needs. Everybody wants to revitalize the older city and seize downtown as an asset. I think people understand that there are mutual interests at play here, and the question is, how do we put those mutual understandings and fuse them into a common community program? I think that a group like a CDC should be somewhat opportunistic. So we, for example, street like Highland and the streets on either side of it, or streets like College, are beautiful streets, and there is a lot to be gained by taking the house that's sort of falling apart, that's really distressing everybody else's property, and making that whole. That is one of the most actually cost-effective things that can be done. So, in a document like this, we cannot program everything that a development entity will do. But what we can say is that here are the different kinds of things that really do make a lot of sense, the different types of categories of programs that have worked, and the places that we see in the city where those types of programs make sense. So now go to it. And yes, it is not just small houses. It may not just be North Salina, but it's wherever an organization like that can do good, and primarily in its evaluation can leverage limited resources to do the most possible with those resources. So if by doing one house on Highland Avenue, you stabilize the value of 20 houses, what a great return on investment that is.
It's interesting, Dodge City actually just finished, they use some moderate income housing. They're just in the process, their economic development organization has been the one basically kind of functioning as their nonprofit developer, and they're in the process, they're just going to establish their own nonprofit development. They've been working with one in Hutchinson. But one of the projects they did using, I think they used the moderate income housing program out of the state, but they used some dollars for that to do a major rehab on a large historic home on the edge of, I think Marty probably knows which house I'm talking about. But it was a large historic home that no one was coming in and really do it. It was really a break-even prospect. Actually, they probably even lost a little bit of money on it, but they really saw it as a really important home to show and demonstrate with.
When you're talking about beachheads, and one that just popped into my head, and you alluded to it a little bit, was, with all the work that's going on downtown, East Avenue, By Center, that whole area to me sounds like a beachhead as well. And I was just wondering, because of all the work that's already going on, or will be going on in the next few years already, would our resources be even better utilized by concentrating on that area? And of course, Oakdale School's right there too, instead of starting with a Five Corners. Yeah,
I guess that would be, the reason that we picked Five Corners is that it's the area that really people focused on. I mean, I think that to me is where the strongest consensus was and one could argue that if there are significant community investments already being made in another area, that they may be good enough, that level of investment may be good enough that it pulls the neighborhood along with it. So it's a good question, and there is a strategic selection process here that should be vetted and considered when you get to that point. But from the perspective of transformational change, really changing the area that people see, I guess, as having a negative effect on the rest of the city. Five Corners seems like the place whereby transforming that area the most good can be done, to us anyway.
Do we have another question?
And actually, you may have just answered it, but in terms of long-range strategies and choosing that, I was going to just ask, in your summary report, how aware are you of the level of private development and/or what's on the table for downtown and that revitalization? And if so, in terms of, is that something that
we are, and we are by no means ignoring downtown, but a downtown plan was really not what we were focusing on. Yes, I mean, the dollars that are being spent in and around downtown are critical, and they're critical to the success of this other stuff too. I mean, if North Salina makes no sense without a strong downtown. It makes a lot of sense with one.
And as a follow-up, I know that in some of the preliminary visioning and selection, there's talk about pre-development of warehouses into up to 110 apartments and those kinds of things. So that would have a direct effect. Well,
absolutely.
Your area's on housing, and that is a potential blank slate for a fairly significant number of houses. Whether or not you've, in your summary recommendations, suggest where the healthiest investment of that redevelopment
Yeah.
takes place.
Yeah, yeah. The other thing to remember is that we are projecting a demand for 1,100 units over a 10-year period, and they're by no means all in here. Yeah, so I mean, it's kind of a dual task here, and one is to look at housing market requirements. It's basically the first couple of chapters. And then the other is to look at neighborhood reinvestment requirements. Yeah, I mean, downtown is could very well be the place where much of the future rental housing gets, at least on a market rate basis, gets provided.
Well, on that line, that vision committee, I know that coming from Kansas City, the one thing they kept stressing, you can have a beautiful downtown if the neighborhoods around it are wide.
That's right.
This will never, and so I was just wondering, it's interesting to me that that hasn't been part of your, I don't know, I totally agree with North Salina, I'm not saying that, but I just thought those neighborhoods around that downtown being ignored completely, even with all this money coming down into the downtown, could be a real error on the side of Salina, on the neighborhoods not being looked at as,
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
yeah.
Are those being identified as conservation areas at the minimum?
Yes.
Yes,
At the
They are.
minimum,
yeah.
with sort of spots of maybe in.
Well, let me mention one other thing, because we look.
Yeah, if you,
Where'd it go? There it is.
figure 3.3 is the small one, but it was part of one of the very last slides that I talked about, and identified where I talked about overlaying all those neighborhood evaluations, and some of those includes the neighborhoods. Neighborhood conservation was a big one for kind of off the 9th and Santa Fe areas. And
Well, this is, we may want to, if we could turn the lights down a bit. Because another area, and this is an example of an area that now moves south of what we call Five Corners and looks at the area around the depot, around Bishop Street. So here, we now, this is the edge of our North Salina development focus. So now we come down with rehab targeting, the same kind of thing we were talking about above, to the railroad corridor. Suggest now reusing some of this land for commercial purposes. The depot, we assume, will be railroad property for a while, but strengthen the crossing at, I guess that would be 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th Street. Look at new development along with restored commercial in the brick buildings on the south side of Bishop. Have some new infill sites, and now we're beginning to get down into that interstitial area between the Five Corners area and downtown. So this kind of, again, keep in mind that you can't do everything at once, and you do try to develop focuses that start to grow together. I mean, it's a little bit like strategic positioning of different kinds of things. But it does feel, it does again feel that the Five Corners area makes, just from a visibility and community agenda point of view, makes an awful lot of sense to focus on. Next steps? Okay. You want to talk a little bit about
Okay, so what we began to identify as kind of those critical next steps, beginning with establishing that financing and strategy policy. So we began to lay that out here. Establishing that CDC, or that the group we have a Chodo here today. Do we need to be reinvigorating that with some funds and some energies and expanding what they're doing here to get those key projects going and playing key roles that the private market hasn't been doing? executing some of those key pilot projects, demonstrating that those projects can happen. And ultimately, that's going to be getting us to providing that predictable multi-year redevelopment and within targeted areas within North Salina. So really, from our perspective, that's some of kind of the key pieces that we need to be doing, especially on that financing strategy and policy, and putting those pieces in place and saying, this is what it's going to kind of take us to get the ball rolling and the momentum going in the right direction. It is about 235, 240. I think it'd be great if there aren't any, a lot, I mean, we can continue to answer questions, but I guess we'd like to spend a little bit of time here at the end also hearing from you, and kind of what you've been hearing today, what kind of maybe most excites you about these critical next steps, what's really ringing true for you. I'd like to kind of take those down and help. I think that will help the city as they move forward in understanding what seems to be ringing true for you, as we've sat here for almost 4 hours now, and hopefully there's been a lot of information to absorb, and hopefully we've gotten through all the questions. So that was kind of my idea of how I'd like to spend, I guess, the last few minutes, is hearing a little bit more from you, and what was kind of really ringing true, what you're excited about as kind of next steps. And we can kind of throw some things up on a flip chart, and I'm going to tear my first page off here because it is beat. And, you know, I don't necessarily, we've tried to keep this pretty conversational, so I hope to continue that this afternoon. And so I guess I'll just say, you know, throw out, whoever would like to go first, and throw something out that you heard today that you thought was very exciting, you think is probably one of the key kind of initial steps that we need to be taking. I guess just one of the, whatever really especially excited you today. Yes?
Well, as a greenfield developer, I was glad to see the discussion on the specials, and I thought it was a positive thing.
Mm-hmm. The idea of kind of a balanced growth.
That's a balanced growth. There's some areas that need them and some that maybe don't. But presently we have a moratorium, so maybe this will give us a little insight down the road.
Mm-hmm. Is that a good summary? Balanced growth policy?
I think you're going to get hopefully some clarification from the, I don't want to use the powers that be, but the people who were elected, say city commission. It gives hopefully a direction or a clear understanding of what they really meant when they said infill development. Like, I don't know that anyone really knew what that meant. Like, for him to say, to go out and buy a lot and just build an $80,000 house here and then buy one over on 12th Street and then one on 10th Street is probably not the best use of our time and energy to revitalize the north end of town, which at one point I thought that's what they were thinking, was they were identifying all of these lots that were available and then piecemealing them out and saying, go build something there. And from the developing standpoint, we knew that wouldn't work on our end because we would lose $20,000 to $50,000 trying to make that happen.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that was encouraging to know that it did give maybe non-developers an understanding that why we rejected that, and if we looked into it, it didn't make sense, and then it maybe gives them a plan of where do we start at 5 Points. So identifying that crucial area at 5 Points probably gets kind of understanding where we can go out from there. You know, we call it 5 Points down as well, so. 4.5 corners, I don't know, I guess we can name it first, I suppose.
There's 5 Points in Garden City, it'll look to here.
Yeah.
It is 5 Points in Garden City.
Which is only 4 points.
I like 4.5 points.
How do you, okay, I'm with North Salina Community Development, how do you see us as a volunteer organization fitting with all this?
Great question. You know, a little bit as that.
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, good. She's from North Salina Redevelopment Corporation and what could their role in that begin to be in this whole process. Well, I think the role that you've played so far has been great because you've been involved with some of the efforts for revitalization and redevelopment. And, and I always say there's different varying levels of which you are willing or have the funding or the support to do. We have definitely seen organizations like yours grow into that kind of nonprofit developer role. But that doesn't necessarily have to go that far because you have the Chodo here already. So that might be a partnership between the two organizations and that you continue to be the catalyst that brings the neighborhood together to understanding what's happening. And you continue to be kind of almost the business development sort of role that you probably have been playing and can continue to play in the area, especially as it relates to, I'm thinking about, because you guys were pretty involved with the landscaping improvements there, right? And so those types of improvements to the neighborhood, bringing landlords together, those sorts of things, I think could be a pretty vital role as you move forward.
In talking about the development corporation, I would say we should not ignore the housing authority. That housing authorities have certain powers that actually work in these directions, and sometimes form development corporations that they either have as subsidiaries or spin-offs. So there may be.
I paid him for that plug.
Yeah, that's true. There may that we in most places in the country, housing authorities are suffering from clinical depression, and we're going out of business. No one loves us. There's no money. We've got all these deteriorating properties, and there's not a lot of creative thinking about. All right. We don't have the greatest hand right now, but what can we do in the future to become a full partner in redevelopment? And I think you have that may be an opportunity to look at too.
So this question's made partly out of ignorance, well, maybe entirely out of ignorance, but the Community Housing Development Organization, the Chodo, here in Salina was not enacted. Is somebody here that's associated with that? Can you give me some more? Can we get some more information about that? What's going on with that? Or I have no idea.
Is that the one Lance Cochran?
Yes. Yeah, Lance.
Gary can speak to that.
Or not.
Didn't quite
I can partially speak to that. The Chodo was formed several years ago, and it has not actually been successful in its project until this year. And they are now named on two different projects, one of them in Salina and another one in Garden City. And they're working hand in hand with Overland Property Ventures Group to work on the Hawthorne and Heritage and Hawthorne, project, and they are on that name, and so they actually now have a project that they are working on, and that is one of the things that will then allow them to get into home grants, community development block grants, those type of things, now that they have a project and they are being successful with that project. The one in Garden City will help them just because it's a second project under their name. And so if it wasn't been for Overland Group, they'd have a real tough struggle right now to keep things going. But we've had contact with them, and they're excited about getting things going in Salina and working with the group. Now that they do have some projects under their wings, they can take off and go with that. Their director left about 1.5 years, 2 years ago. 2 years ago now? Somewhere, something like that. And so they struggled to get somebody on board to be their director. That's what we need next is a full-time director.
Is the Overland Group?
No,
that's
Chodo. Yes.
It is a separate group from Overland Properties. Overland Properties is very generous to allow them to be a signer on the grant and the notes and that stuff for that project.
I see.
Yeah, it is important that is a great thing. It's really a sign of progress. But we are talking about something that involves a lot more active involvement than being the vehicle by which tax credits are awarded, which Chodos are. I mean, they have a special allocation for Chodo-associated projects of low-income housing tax credits. So we're suggesting here that, that we go beyond that a real development capacity be developed. And that really is a community project. I mean, that will involve the collected financial expertise of financial institutions, of grand development expertise of city government, of development and home building expertise of the development and home builders industries, and the local knowledge of groups like North Salina Community Development. I mean, it takes all of these different groups to sort of now say, all right, we are going to stop talking and we're going to start doing, and we're going to put together our various resources to make this kind of thing happen. So, you know, one other thought that I don't know if we're ready to leave yet, but that I would certainly leave you with is to say that we need to view the issues of housing and neighborhood development in Salina as a unified effort. So for people to say, well, I don't really do in-city stuff, I do stuff out here, or for somebody to say, I don't really care about what happens out there, they're bound together. I mean, the value of the community, the value of the central part of the community, of the older part of the city, depends upon new development and economic viability on the edges. The value of the edges and of their ability to sustain themselves depends on having a vital central city. Everybody, whether they know it or not, is tied together. And I really think that if we leave you with any message at all, it's that this will take a unified cooperative effort that recognizes everybody's needs and everybody's priorities and produces not a greenfield versus infill strategy, but a continuum strategy by which everybody is interested in everything.
Marty, I think, I'm still not sure I got my question answered a little bit ago that you were going to answer, because I think we walk out of this room and we all head different directions. Who leads the charge in this, or where have you seen in other cities? Because I mean, I see, the housing authority needs to be involved, Habitat, you need the financial institutions, the city, private developers, which include the home builders, the realtors, the Chodo. But who gets all that group together? If not, we leave this room and all of a sudden we all go our different ways. Who's going to be who leads that charge, or who has led that charge in other communities?
It has been led in different places by a developer or two who really had the fire in their belly about it, really said, we're going to be the organizational framework. That's not common, but it has happened. It is often a chamber of commerce or an economic development corporation that has understood that you don't just attract, you don't just chase smokestacks or attract industries, that housing and the quality of the city are just fundamental cores of economic development. And that's a fairly common situation, a fairly common convener. Sometimes the city has been able to do it, but it's tough. It's tough to do it from inside city government. Although sometimes elected leadership has the credibility and the power to make that happen.
I was just going to say, I would say probably across Kansas in some of the conversations.
Typically the EDCs or chambers.
Yep, it's come out of that recognition, and I had a conversation recently with somebody who said that we would not have had economic development if we didn't do the housing piece. That was, we were at a point where we were going to start stagnating, and we had to do the housing to do the economic development. Yeah.
What about, another possibility, professional, private planners and engineers and architects and landscape architects? Generally...
They usually don't get the job done.
But generally they'll work generally, I'm a landscape architect
Yeah.
and land planner, and I've worked in communities where the development's considerably riskier and harder than it is here. Generally, that process was driven by a local real estate broker who had contacts with developers from outside of the community and would bring them to our local planners to say, private planners to say, hey, work out an arrangement here, do some, said to the planners, do some marketing here, get a project rolling, make a market, get things going. Is that kind of thing? Would you see an
I would say that's
opportunity here or
that's
no?
uncommon. I mean, the professional design communities make great partners. I don't know that there aren't that many situations where they've really been the conveners of the process. Some other directions that are major institutions. So, for example, a hospital will or a medical center or a major industry or two in a specific area will get that project going. North Salina does not have that sort of.
Yeah, but we as a community, we've done that. I mean,
But
Brian was here at the field house.
yeah,
That came in from his partnership as a developer with an architect and engineer saying, hey, we've got this idea, let's get the
Let's
ball
make that
rolling.
happen.
And it's just a let's get the ball rolling type
Yeah.
of exercise. And,
Yeah.
and that's what it was. Not that I don't think the architects led that. I mean, Brian, the developer, led it. But just, is there a role on a team for our private?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, no, yeah,
I
no,
mean, they're
yeah.
almost, I would think they're almost essential.
Yeah, no question about it. But I haven't seen that many situations where now it's possible. I mean, it's possible. And they're certainly team players. I mean, they're certainly members of the group, and they may even be the members that supply vision to it. The best place is somebody with a hell of a lot of money who puts. We've got one of those, and that's really sort of in spearheading a project. Who's got.
I'm excited about a couple of things that you brought up. And one thing that we as a city can do is upgrade the streets and curbs in those areas that are so depressed, such as North Salina. And I think that makes a world of difference.
It does
people
make a
have to
world of
run over
difference.
cracked streets. The other thing is, I love the Centennial Project because we were just, of course, the community has come out about that several times. And they don't like it because they think they're going to lose that area or the park or something. But from looking at your detail there, it seemed like a pretty good project because Halbert could still be parked. And there could still be that green space and still be some housing out there. And I think it's needed. So anyway, those are things.
Thanks. I think that's true. That the secret to that project is to say we're going to make the park better. Plus, we're going to make the neighborhood better. You know, we're going to add good value, quality houses to it as well. And
I think it'll upgrade that.
oh, it will.
Area.
Yeah, it's hard to get people to see that.
I know.
Yeah.
I think that piece in the park improvement is a big piece is a very important piece to that. Because right now, it's not functioning as a park.
It's not.
And so they're going to get, ultimately,
That's about all it is.
ultimately, it should be a better park in the end, with better features that combines with some added value housing.
Yes.
Following up on this question about who leads the charge, in your experience, how have other cities incorporated younger population?
How can they incorporate younger populations?
Because speaking, I believe I'm the only one. If I'm not mistaken, I'm the only
Have
one
gray
here.
hair yet.
Yeah, no gray hair.
Is there young professionals or?
Yeah, young professionals, a young professional group out of like, a lot of times we see them out of a chamber group has.
We have
Yeah, yeah. That's usually the way we've seen them get most heavily involved. And, you know, we've seen in Omaha, our young professional group lead the charge on some different things. And maybe this is one of those.
Especially transit planning.
Yeah, transit, it's been a big thing.
Yeah. But I think that that young people, young households, young people are obviously critical. Again, from the point of view of actually being able to convene all these different resources, it's tough unless there's somebody who can be identified as being such a recognized leader that they can make this happen. You know, we don't know the people and the characters in Salina well enough to anoint somebody as the leader. It's got to be somebody though. Otherwise, you know, we'll leave and give you the report and that will not be satisfying to
I'd
anyone.
like to nominate Mike Hoppick.
That's who I do.
All in favor?
Ready to adjourn now? I want to just comment, no matter how this formulates, it's exciting to look at the possibilities that you mentioned, even if, as you say, they're applied in different places. And however that gets formed, if there is a group that begins to work on that with some leadership, we might utilize an underutilized asset in the community access television and advertise that and perhaps focus it on neighborhoods. So the people, if we did the Centennial Project first, that people in that neighborhood got a chance to participate in that. Some kind of community forum which is not only presented and advertised, but put on access for people to get excited about. Because if you get a population then behind you, that's part of that momentum I think you're talking about. And I do think it's important to have something visibly that they can see.
Yeah.
Even, as you point out, the landscaping project at 5 points or corners is...
5 corners, right.
It is. It lends visibility to community spirit.
Yeah.
I think what you said there about the gets people excited is so interesting, because I think when you have that first successful project that everybody kind of sees that we talked about, it should build the momentum that people in the community are saying, when's the next one coming? When are we going to see that next one? And that's when you know you're building that excitement and momentum.
I was just going to say, again, it comes from some sort of leadership, whether it's the new economic development committee that's being formed, or it is formed, or wherever it's out of the chamber. I would hope that in 6 months, whoever's leading the charge would come out, and even if it's identifying the 5 corners and saying, okay, we're going to put a revitalization district in this area that's been outlined by the housing study, then it gives me something to go out and talk to the community about. When they're looking to invest money, I can say, okay, the leadership of Salina that's been appointed has looked at this spot and said, this is a great place that we're going to bend over backwards, give you some incentives, and look at it as that. And that has to come from the leadership, giving us direction as community builders to say, where am I not going to hit a brick wall? Where are you going to open up your arms to us?
That's right.
In North Salina and say, you come to us with a plan in this area, and we will bend over backwards.
We'll make it
move
happen.
mountains for you to do
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
That entices me then to
That's
go out
right.
and find those other people who have money to go do that.
Right. Yeah, that's implicit. One other thing that I would mention is that this effort has to be that volunteers can get things started, but there has to be somebody whose job it is, you know, who's accountable and who moves this whole program forward. Whatever, I don't know where that is, but there's got to be somebody who's specifically the director of the effort who makes it all happen. Because volunteers peter out. You know, you have great intentions, and you get tired, and it just really doesn't it doesn't gel. And we're talking about what's from a organizational point of view, it's ultimately a business. It's a business start. And it can't be done as a hobby. It's got to be somebody's job. And the successful development corporations have worked on that model. In our city, one came from a church, was faith-based. Two of them were faith-based. Another from minority community-based. But it's got to be somebody who really who has support from different sectors of the community, but there's got to be somebody who is the...
It's almost like the volunteer base comes
Direct.
together to bring the money, to bring the funding, to create the position.
To create
and
that,
support that
yeah.
position in a way.
Yeah.
But yeah, then they're leaving it.
So if that coming together happens, can the Chodo and the executive director of the Chodo take on the breadth of what you have in mind here?
I think ultimately yes. Ultimately yes, but you can't. You can't in a city Salina size. You can't hire all that staff internally. It's going to be a community effort where realtors are involved in marketing property, where developers may be the builders of the builders of the individual projects on a basically fee basis, to make it worth their time and expertise. Where the city is a full partner. Yeah, so it's going to be to take the range. That's why I say it's got to be viewed. This has got to be viewed as a community project, as a community effort. But again, there's a focal point for that. He's got to say, okay, guys, I need your help on building houses at $120,000 in this area. We know. Here's what we'll pay you, and work that all out. The maestro, the director, has to be there, but the players are the various areas of expertise around the city. But yes, it can, and that's how you take a small staff and amplify it. That's really the only way it'll happen.
We're at about 5 after 3. And I respect everybody's time. So.
We've had a lot to absorb, and I think it's been a great presentation and very, very enlightening. I know this is a draft, and I know you have a lot to absorb. When do you think we might see a final?
I think there's a few things to fine tune.
Yeah.
I know did we have a planning commission date we were shooting for?
We don't have one specifically specified, but now that we have gone through the draft plan, I think it's pretty limited on the number of changes we're going to be seeing in the plan.
Yeah.
So it'll be going to the planning commission's office.
But there certainly are some things we picked up today that we want to change and incorporate into the plan. So I don't know if we have a date. We probably want, I'm guessing, a few weeks to revise.
Well, and we want to leave it open for probably another week or two. It's up on the website
Yeah,
for
that's
people to
right.
review and give
Yeah.
us any
When you
comments back.
revise this, will there be like a red line copy online so you can see what's...
See what's gotten
Yeah,
changed.
because so I don't have to read the full 85
We can do that. Yeah, we can do that. That's scintillating, because we may not redline grammatical changes, because I've seen a few things that are
Yeah, I saw one of those.
clumsy sentences, but substantive things we'll track changes.
Yeah. So we'll kind of leave it kind of what I would call open for the next couple of weeks for people to finish reviewing and getting any comments. And then it's probably another couple of weeks for us to get those comments made and back.
So probably close to the first of the year.
Yeah.
If you haven't checked in or signed in today on the sheet, then we would appreciate you doing that. We'd like to be able to contact you later and let you know for sure when the final draft or final program is going to be online. We do appreciate you very much spending 4 hours, almost 5 hours with us today. It's been a great day. I think there's been some input. It's taken a lot of work for Marty and Amy to come to our house, basically multiple times throughout the last 9 months or so. So I would like to give them a round of applause.
And we're really gratified by all of you being here and by your interest and energy and courtesy, and it does make us feel good, and it just sort of cements the bond that we felt with Salina. So, after we've finished and wrapped up the report, we're still here for you.
Yeah, and we're not fracking here, even though we feel the effects of the earthquake at 4.7 this morning at 3 a.m.
You had an
Even in
earthquake?
Oklahoma. Did you really?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay,
All right, thank you.